But let's start with whether President Obama now has the political opening to wind down the war in Afghanistan. Howard Fineman is an MSNBC political analyst and the Huffington Post Group's editorial director. And Eugene Robinson is a columnist for the Washington Post and an MSNBC political analyst as well. Gentlemen, let's take a look at President Obama last night.
Because of the extraordinary bravery of the men and women who wear this nation's uniform and the outstanding work of our intelligence agencies, Osama bin Laden will never again threaten the United States of America. We couldn't be prouder of them.
And I guess the country's pretty proud of the president right now. A new Associated Press poll right now has the president's approval rating skyrocketing up to 60%. That's 6-0. Gene, that's high. That's very high.
That is high. It's certainly way higher than he's been in a long time. Look, I think these approval numbers will go up and down, and we also ought to keep an eye on another number, which is the unemployment rate, which is going to have something to say about the president's popularity in the coming months. But clearly, there's been a bounce from the killing of bin Laden, and I actually think it's not just a temporary thing. I think that this probably has been a ratchet upwards in terms of his acceptance by a lot of people.
Well, let's talk about his flexibility and his credibility. You know, Howard, nothing succeeds like success is an old phrase, and it's true in foreign policy. Will he now have more credibility when he says, you know what, 10 years enough, we got to start coming home from that country?
Well, first of all, on the credibility question, the polls clearly show that he's now regarded as an effective commander-in-chief. That's a priceless asset for any president. It's one, by the way, that Democrats haven't enjoyed in recent decades. This puts to rest the whole weak on defense attack by Republicans on Democratic presidents and Democratic candidates. That's a huge advantage for the president, whatever happens to the minor fluctuations in the polls. I think his staff thinks he has more flexibility, but that does not necessarily mean that there's going to be a much more rapid withdrawal of troops. After all, it's a long timeline in Afghanistan, up to 2014. The president, having succeeded against Osama, I think would like to see what else he could get done in the time that he has there. I think nothing succeeds like success. He's interested in this now because he succeeded at it, and I think he thinks there's more to do. But he's also got to satisfy his liberal base within the Democratic Party. There aren't many things he can do on the economy, as Gene was saying, that is really going to excite the Democratic base. But a more rapid withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, I think, would go to the original anti-war constituency that, after all, is the one that got Obama started.
Yeah, let's take a look at how I think he has had a sharp foreign policy. It hasn't succeeded yet, obviously, but let's take a look at how he's developed it. Here he was talking about his goals in Afghanistan when he announced that revised war strategy, the more troops over there back in March of 2009. Listen to what he said he was going to do. Then we'll look at what he did. Let's watch the first part.
So I want the American people to understand that we have a clear and focused goal: to disrupt, dismantle, and defeat al-Qaeda in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and to prevent their return to either country in the future. That's the goal that must be achieved. That is a cause that could not be more just. And to the terrorists who oppose us, my message is the same: we will defeat you.
Well, there you have a very clear, much more than we had in the old days of the Bush administration, a sharp focus. We're going to go get al-Qaeda. We're not the nation builder. We're not to do anything else but to get al-Qaeda in those two countries, Pakistan and in Afghanistan. Now, here he is, the president, this Sunday on 60 Minutes, talking about the progress of that effort. He suggests that the killing of bin Laden has put those goals, that goal, within reach. Let's listen.
We've got the opportunity, I think, to really finally defeat at least al-Qaeda in that border region between Pakistan and Afghanistan. That doesn't mean that we will defeat terrorism. It doesn't mean that al-Qaeda hasn't metastasized to other parts of the world where we've got to address operatives there. But it does mean we've got a chance to, I think, really deliver a fatal blow to this organization if we follow through aggressively in the months to come.
Gene, is he nailing it there? The implication being that we're achieving our particular goal, his particular goal of breaking apart, in fact, demolishing al-Qaeda in those countries of Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Well, he seemed to be saying that, but remember, Chris, shortly after taking office, President Obama dramatically increased U.S. troop strength in Afghanistan, and then he did it again. So this is his surge in Afghanistan. In some ways, this has become his war. And so, has he finished? Has he reached the goals he set, which involve counterinsurgency and a really elaborate program in Afghanistan? I'm not convinced that he's saying, kind of brushing his hands and saying, okay, our mission here is accomplished. I think a lot of people would like to hear him say that, but I don't think I've heard that yet.
Well, maybe I'm trying to hear it too. Go ahead, your thoughts.
I totally agree with Gene. And don't forget that the Navy SEALs just came back with an unbelievable treasure trove of information taken from bin Laden's home that could allow the president to lead another mission or expanded missions to really root out, like pull out from the roots what's going on that border region. It seems to me that's what the president's focused on. He's not going to start pulling a bunch of troops out necessarily when they're looking for actionable intelligence right now, and they may have a whole lot of it about that whole region.
Well, let's break this apart. Remember the big debate about 6 months ago between counterinsurgency and counterterrorism. Counterterrorism meaning what we did this last week, the United States government through the SEALs going over and getting a terrorist and killing him. That's counterterrorism. Counterinsurgency is taking on the whole wide scope of a war against the Taliban, especially in Afghanistan, where you're really fighting on a very wide front, attempting to change the history of a country. Does the success with picking up and killing bin Laden and picking up that intel to go get further elements of al-Qaeda in those countries possibly win the argument for Joe Biden, who we just saw there being hugged by the president, in saying counterterrorism is the way to go here, not counterinsurgency? Gene.
Well, you would think it would strengthen the hand of those who are making that argument. And in fact, counterterrorism has played a larger and larger role in our Afghanistan strategy with drone strikes and essentially saying, well, if the Pakistanis won't do it, first in the Northwest Territories and then in Abbottabad, we'll go do it ourselves. So, in a sense, that's been increasing already. But the president has consistently said that we have to leave the government of Afghanistan in a reasonable situation, so that Taliban can't come back, so that it can't be a haven for terrorists of any stripe. Are we there yet? Is the government of Hamid Karzai capable of
will we ever
doing
be?
that?
Will we ever be, Gene? Ever?
Well,
ever,
Chris,
ever.
I'm with you, but I'm saying what I hear.
Okay, Howard, I want you to wrestle with the new statistics, because these get to the politics of what the president may be up to. He does look at polls. Here's the newest USA Today poll. It shows that nearly 60% of Americans think the U.S. has accomplished its mission in Afghanistan, and it's time for the troops to come home. Now, look at these numbers. They're fascinating. Democrats, no surprise, 2-1, let's come home, 66-33. But look at the independent voters, almost the same thing, 62-31. And the Republicans, they're not the hawk party on this, 47-47. It's so fascinating, Gene, or Howard, that it's not really a partisan issue as much as it used to be. It's not just the Republicans or the hawks, the Democrats or the doves. The independents and the Democrats say come home, and the Republicans are split.
Well, I think that to answer your previous question, because it applies to this, I think the president is going to emphasize counterterrorism more. And I think even though the withdrawals this summer from Afghanistan are going to be largely symbolic, that the key time for him politically in terms of withdrawals of troops is going to be next summer, not this July, but next July, heading into the 2012 presidential election. I think his plan is to focus on counterterrorism. He loves the Navy SEALs. If he could deploy them all over again, press that same button, while meantime looking for ways to withdraw more troops. It's sort of a total reversal of what George Bush said he was going to do. I think you're going to see more of that because it's going to play to the president's political advantage, especially by next year.
I want to go back to what Gene was saying a few minutes ago, because I want to ask you guys both, you're the smartest guys around, the biggest, broadest question I could ask. I get the sense that President Obama doesn't think he can deal with gas prices by the end of next year at election time. He can't really deal with the unemployment rate. Hopefully he'll get down to below 8, but he can't really deal with the problem. He can't really deal with immigration because nobody's in the mood to really cut a deal. It's like the Middle East, and nobody ever wants a deal, a tough one. So he's saying, I'm going to change the election next year from conditions, which are going to be tough anyway in terms of the economy, to the argument question. What kind of immigration policy do you want? What do you want to do with the social programs like Medicare? What do you want to do with things like Afghanistan? Do you think he's going to change it from how are things going, which won't necessarily help, in fact, it might kill him, to what kind of a country do you want? What are the issues? Do you think he's up to that, Gene, as a politician, changing the topic?
I think that's a good reading of where he might be headed, Chris, because as you said, there's not going to be, I'm pretty sure, a grand bargain on entitlements on budget. There's not going to be a huge breakthrough on immigration, probably. I don't see how that could happen. But this question of what kind of country are we? Who are we? What kind of country do you want in 10 years and 15 years? Is a good thing for the president to talk about. And when he starts talking about taking care of senior citizens, for example, and what entitlements actually do, rather than the sort of boogeyman word of entitlements, I think he scores points. I think that's a good argument for him.
It's really Howard, quickly.
I think, Chris, that he's going to focus on values, as Gene was implying. It's the opposite. In the past, the Republicans were working on values. Now the president's going to talk about values.
Because he has to, because he can't talk about conditions
He can't
yet.
talk about the numbers. He made the mistake in early of 2009 of saying, I'm going to be judged by my performance. Well, if he's judged by his performance on the economy, it's a tough sell. But if he's judged on the basis of values, and it's a referendum on values, he's got a shot.
Great, thank you. I think we all agree. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Howard Feinman, Eugene Robinson.